The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
My name is Jonna Paraiso. I am the Instructional Technology Facilitator and SIFE Facilitator for Rutherford County Schools. SIFE stands for Students with Interrupted Formal Education. It can also stand for Significantly Interrupted Formal Education. Sometimes the acronym SLIFE is used, and that means students with limited and interrupted formal education. Generally, and we'll talk more about this, generally the federal definition refers to students that have missed 2 or more years of school. They don't have to be consecutive years. And the emphasis is on grades 6 through 12. We still have them in elementary school. It's just that elementary, they tend to do a better job. The emphasis is on developing literacy in the elementary school, whereas in middle and high school, the emphasis is on reading to learn, and it is assumed that your literacy is already there. And that is not necessarily the case, particularly with our English learners who come from a background where they have not accessed instruction. So before we get started, I would like for you all to tell me a little bit, we're not going to go around the room, but tell me a little bit about yourselves and what you hope to take away from today's session. So we can maybe pick each other's brains, learn from each other, and so we can talk about things that you specifically want to take back with you.
I'm the clean slate, so I've never taught ESL high school before, but that's where I'm going.
Okay, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay. It is a great place to be. I love my high schoolers.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. In my district, just to let me clarify here, I wear a number of different hats. I work with a refugee program that we've started specifically for students with interrupted formal education who are age 17 or older. Tennessee law allows those students, if they choose, and the emphasis is on choice, if they choose to opt out of a traditional high school, they can go to an adult ed program, which is similar to what I run. I cooperate with a number of different nonprofit agencies, and the student and his parent or guardian would sign the same paperwork that homeschoolers sign, pretty much the same paperwork, and your director of schools would have to sign off on that. And you would have to have an approved program. We couldn't just say, okay, yeah, you don't have to go to school. They have to be going to a real place. Also, we cannot force students 17 or older not to come to school. So if parents want their students to come to a traditional high school, they have that constitutional right. We cannot force them to go to a different school. That can be a challenge when you've got principals that are looking at kiddos that have no credits and no English because they haven't been to school in 6 years. And they're struggling, and the principal knows that this child is not going to graduate with his or her cohort, and they're going to get dinged for it. But
in the meantime, I have that student for 1 to 4 years.
Yes, exactly.
And gen ed teachers flipping out because they don't know what to do with them when they have them in class in high school. When they arrive and they're 16, 17, and they start as 9th graders, and they have no English, and maybe they're not strong in their first language either, or their first language is an indigenous language that we don't have any access to, and we're trying to survive on their second language.
Exactly.
It's really tough. And then I'm interested in 2 things. I'm interested in that situation where they're coming in with very little background, weak math skills, like they know what multiplication is, but they don't really know the multiplication tables, like that level. and then the language issues as well, and how to keep them in school as long as we can, because when they come 16, 17, it's like the minute they turn 18, they've already figured out that after that, nobody can make me.
Right.
You know, and so then usually you lose them then, and that's just so sad because you could do more for them if they would stay. And then the other situation is I've got one now that's been with me 3 years, and he's going to graduate. Which, I mean, that gives me chills when I even say it, but, you know, and he's a great story. And they just went around doing the, you know, what are you going to do after high school stuff, and that you can go to community college for free and all that exciting stuff. And he doesn't qualify for any of that, and where do we go? How do we help this child who is going to graduate? It's like the greatest thing. And then we have to deliver the disappointment that after that we can do nothing for you, even though, gosh, he's earned it. I mean, so earned it. He earns it every day.
Frustrating.
He already turned 18, still continues to come, take the test, took the ACT. I mean, just, you know, what can I do for him now?
Exactly. Do you all have any response to her issues that she raised? I see that all the time. And there is a, I forget what it's called. There is an organization here in Tennessee that helps to give scholarships to those, yes.
Is it Jump Tennessee?
That might be it.
Yeah, I think I have like contact.
Yeah, if you could share that, that would be
Because
great.
starting as a senior this year, I have a little time to try to find something, I'm hoping.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then one of the main presenters yesterday had mentioned that there was some type of page that you went to. So I can't remember which of the two. It's probably in my notes from yesterday, but that there were private scholarships from private universities.
There are private scholarships, and Trevecca is one that does that. Lipscomb gives some scholarships. And the general tuition cost of those universities is higher, but they give more financial assistance to our undocumented students, who of course qualify for nothing. They qualify for no student loans, nothing.
The one we talked about yesterday was called National Scholarship for Undocumented Students and Equal Chance for Education.
Okay, equal chance for education. If you could give that to her at some point, I would so appreciate
I would
it.
like to know where you found that law that says it's legal, because we were doing that. Our 17-year-olds were going to with adult high.
Yes.
But then last year they made us change it, and they told us that was illegal because we weren't providing them the education.
Okay, it is not illegal. It depends on your school district. There is in Tennessee, and I don't have the law with me, but all of our students are cleared with our staff attorney. There is a law in Tennessee that says students that are age 17 or older, beginning with their 17th birthday, may opt out of traditional high school if, and the principal may may encourage them not to come if it will disrupt the entire school. So it's a little gray area. It's only for 17-year-olds. If they're 16, they have to go to traditional high school.
Doing that, and then they came
What
in.
school district? Okay, they were probably scared, but they can
Yeah,
do.
because something happened like in Memphis.
Shelby County, with Shelby County, they were requiring this, well, they were turning 17-year-olds away. So parents were coming in and saying, I want my child to go to a traditional high school, and they were saying, no, you can't. That's the problem. If our parents come in and say, I want my child to go to a traditional high school, they go to a traditional high school. But what I find frequently with our older kids that come in, they don't know about compulsory education laws anyway. The kids that I work with now are light years different than the ELs that I worked with 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the ELs that I was working with were, for the most part, from Mexico. They were, for the most part, migrant. They were here for jobs. Their families were here for jobs. They would move around to do nursery work or construction work. That is not the case anymore. Yes, we still have those students, but by and large, the students that we are seeing in Rutherford County, the new students with limited interrupted formal education, come through Mexico, but they are not from Mexico. They are from Central America, and they are fleeing poverty and violence in their home countries. They are not here to work. Yeah, they want to work. That's not an issue. They are mostly here to stay alive. And they have had issues with gangs back in their home countries. For example, the program that I work with, I refer to my refugee program. They are 17-year-olds. For the most part, these kids have not had opportunity to go to school, even though their countries have compulsory education laws on the books. Those laws are not enforced. So for some of my kids, getting the 1 mile from home to school, they're taking their lives in their hands because they have to cross through different gang territories. And they may not make it. And that's how they ended up here in the first place. Also, something else that we may not realize, in the United States, if you have a public education, for the most part, it's all free, especially if you're on free and reduced lunch. In other countries, that's not the case. School may be free, but your books are not free, your uniforms are not free, your fees are not provided. So school still has an incredible cost. Another challenge that our older kids face, well, and some of our younger kids, compulsory education in the United States is enforced. So if they don't want to go to school because they've got some jobs that they need to get done, that roofing is coming up, they can't just not go because they're going to get that letter from their parents are going to get the letter, or their guardians. It seems like my kids are always here with an uncle. So they're going to get that letter, and the truant officer is going to show up, and there's going to be a problem. And they are not expecting that. That's not anything that they'd experienced in their other countries. So that's a challenge for our kids as well. What are some other things that you hope to take away? We've talked about the financial aid. Yes?
Well, I'm on the elementary level, but we see the same thing I work with newcomers, kids coming in. We're not sure about their formal education because they don't really have records. They don't speak English. Like she said, the classroom teacher does not know what to do with them. We usually can serve them for 90 minutes as a newcomer. And of course, in high school they have much more ground to cover. But even in elementary, when they've never had the building blocks, they don't speak English. They don't have the basics. We had this year a little boy that was with us in kindergarten, and then he went back to Mexico, enrolled with us as a 4th grader, and has not been to school. And this was he enrolled in April or May, toward the end of he took access, but he came right at the window. So going into 5th grade he has 4 years missing and does not speak English.
Yes.
And it's difficult. We know what to do with them more, but then the classroom, they really just kind of sit in the classroom.
It's like they need a full-time assistant, like they do with, special ed students that need someone to go with them and hold their hand for a while until.
Really aren't equipped. They aren't equipped to deal with.
No, and of course classroom teachers, they're scared about their own scores and how this child is going to affect their own scores. And
they're teaching content up here. It's so hard for them to know how to differentiate for a child that comes in with no English and no skills.
It really is. And what I have found is advocacy takes on a new level when you're dealing with that, because you become a teacher of teachers in your building. You are the building level specialist. And unfortunately, you may encounter some prejudicial attitudes that they may not even realize that they have. Some of our teachers, bless them, did not realize teachers that I have encountered did not realize that we were required to teach children no matter their immigration status. And we could not by law ask their immigration status. And as I've gone into schools and done presentations, I have had to inform them, we can't ask them, are you documented or not documented? And if they tell you, you're like the priest, you're like a Catholic priest, you don't tell anybody. That's the privilege we have as educators. For the time being, that is what we've got. And our teachers don't know that. So giving teachers solid strategies to use with their kids can be a challenge when we're not sure of the solid strategies ourselves. Anything else? Yes.
So that's what I want the strategies, because I too have a newcomers class, but it took me 3 years to get it from my administrator. And I did finally get it this past year, so some of those strategies, and then to share with the teachers, because they do have them for the majority of the day. Our class is only an hour, but I'd love to have it 90 minutes.
I mean, our teachers are would be more than happy for us to take them all day long. I mean,
yeah.
they are
Oh, yeah.
happy for them to be with us at 90 minutes. But yeah, for our newcomers, they do allow us to have them for 90 minutes.
I wrote that down.
Our county is very blessed. We keep them a half a day. We have a global learning center, so that we pull them and we give them credits. Most of our teachers have gone and taken praxis after praxis to be able to teach, other subjects and get them credits. And we can do it for a year, so we choose to do it a half a day for 2 years to get that year's service.
Right.
And some of them we just pull, like our Chinese students don't need our academic help, but they need the social part, and so it's really a great program.
That sounds wonderful, and that is something that I would love to see more counties, including my own, do, but we get a lot of pushback from transportation.
It's hard. It's a challenge.
Transportation rules. It's a challenge.
I did my practicum at the newcomer program in Allgood.
That's where I am.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I did that 2 years ago.
Right. I remember.
So is it a choice for the kids to go to the newcomer program, or are they required to go?
They're not required. They could refuse it, but no one has refused it. We kind of base it on the intake score. It has to be like below 1.5 on the intake score.
And that would be, instead of what I'm doing, that would suit your students' needs. So that may be why.
They still have to work for credits there, whereas your students wouldn't have to actually do that.
Exactly. Yeah, I encourage my kids to take the high set. I've had 2 take the high set. One passed, one didn't. The one that passed was a girl. She had a lot of education in her home country, but when she came here, she didn't want the traditional school environment. So, and again, we are faced with the kids that come here, they're going to turn 18 and they've got to work. It's just a financial necessity. So let's take a look. First of all, I've got a short video I want to share with you, and then we're going to take a look at some specific strategies that we can use with our kids. So we already know who they are. Now what do we do with them when they come? One thing that I find with my kids, they want to learn. They realize that learning English is the key to everything else, but they get frustrated. And sometimes my kids will say to me, I'm just not going to do it. I'm tired. I'm not going to learn this. It's too much. And I will tell them, fine, nobody's going to make you learn English, but you won't be able to read your lease on your apartment, and you won't be able to read the signs at the grocery store. You won't be able to read the internet. So you'll have to rely on somebody to tell you what everything says, and you'll have to hope that they're not lying to you. And if you don't want to do math, that's okay. That's fine. You don't have to, but just know that someone will probably cheat you out of all your money, because you won't know how to figure prices and you won't know how to figure tax. Then you won't be able to tell if you're making enough, if you're getting enough change back. So just know that. And they kind of sit back and they go, okay, I got you. I understand that. So what I have found with my SLIFE kids, even in the traditional high school and in the refugee program where I work, I have to make the instruction immediately applicable. It has to be something they can take with them right then. So I've got a quick video of some of my kids. Now some of them, honestly, don't come back once they hit 18. So some of the kids that are in those pictures, I don't have anymore. The interesting thing is they keep in touch with me via Facebook and text. And I am very careful because I allow them to friend me on Facebook after they turn 18. I'm very careful what I put on my Facebook. A couple of reasons. First, it's just a good idea. And secondly, you've heard what happened in Bean Station a couple months ago, right? Morristown. ICE came in and raided a chicken processing plant and arrested about 100 workers, even those that they detained about 100 workers, even those that had documentation. And they were detained for a couple days, and the next day, their children, to the tune of about 600 children, did not come to school because they were afraid. So I don't want anything that I put out on social media to draw too much attention to my kids. I don't know who's documented and who's not, and I don't care. If they show up, I'm going to teach them what they need to know. So I would encourage you to use whatever means you can, given your school district, to keep in touch with your kids. Especially with our SLIFE students, frequently the ESL teacher is the first person they can trust. You're the first friendly face. They come here and current political climate tells them that they're not really welcome. And we don't really care if they watched their father be stabbed to death by a warring gang. Nobody is interested in that. They're here, they're not legal. So what do we do with them? They're gonna pull our scores down. First thing that I would encourage you to do is to understand these children have social and emotional needs. For the most part, they've had trauma experiences. If you have a chance to take a look at some trauma-informed teaching resources, which I would love to do in here, but time won't permit, that's for another session. So many of our older kids, I say older because they've had more exposure, but our young ones have had traumatic experiences in the past as well. If you listen to their stories, some of the things that you will hear might horrify you. I had a girl that came to me in 6th grade. She had not been to school in 4 years, and we were working on writing skills. So of course I have to differentiate like crazy because she was in a regular ESL class, and I've had to learn how to bring the instruction down to her level. But one of the writing assignments was, tell me what you're most afraid of. And I was thinking, in my limited experience at that time, that the children would say, I'm most afraid of robbers, I'm most afraid of guns. And indeed, some of them did say that, I'm most afraid of thunderstorms. Not this girl. This girl wrote down, I am most afraid of lions. Now, she had been in a refugee camp in Kenya. She was from the Sudan. She'd been in a refugee camp for about 5 years. She had watched the soldiers dig a hole in the ground and bury her father up to his neck and then drive a stake through the top of his head when she was 6 years old. They forced the family to watch that. I was teaching her in Laverne, Tennessee. That part didn't come out, that story didn't come out till later. She held that in. And when I questioned her later, why are you most afraid of lions? That seems so funny to me. And she said, well, in the camp, she said, all the bathrooms are outside the camp. They don't have any toilets in the camp. So we have to go outside the camp to use the toilet. And you never go alone because someone has to come with you to keep the lions away, because the lions circle the camp if they see someone coming by themselves. You know what? I never would have dreamed this. Never in a million years. And until I had that writing assignment, and then additionally took the time to question her, why are you afraid of lions? Then I found out why. That's what's going on in the back of her mind. She's still carrying this, even in school. And what I find with a lot of our SLIFE kids and some of our other ones, the practices that they used in their home countries to keep them alive are the very practices that are going to get them kicked out of school here. And that is part of our initial acculturation to the United States classroom, because that same little girl, her name was Rachel. Rachel, everything was a fight for her. Food was a fight, a place to sleep was a fight. So in her little middle school, when a girl came up to her and just shoved her, she turned around and clocked her and knocked her out cold. So Rachel ended up in an alternative school because of that, zero tolerance. But you know, she was only acting in accordance with what she had to do to stay alive, because it was kill or be killed over there. So many of our kids are dealing with that, and they may or may not talk.
I had a 4th grader who bit another student.
Say that again?
I had a 4th grader who bit another student. Felt threatened, didn't have the language to defend herself, and bit the other child.
I wish I could say that's an unusual thing.
When you're terrified and cornered, I mean, you know, you get them.
You use what you've got. And that is part of our teaching with our students and part of our teaching with our colleagues and our administration. Now, Rachel, when she went to, it was Smyrna West was her alternative school. She loved it. It's a very controlled environment. They wand the kids as they come in the door. They have uniforms, but the classes are small and everything is predictable. And there's nothing, no one touches anybody, no one talks in the hallway. So when she was sent back to the regular school after she did her time, she did the same thing again, just so she could get sent back to the alternative school because it was more personal there. And after having some conferences with the administrator, we decided that she could finish out there. We'll just keep her there because of her particular situation. She did graduate from high school, which was wonderful. She had a baby at her 11th grade year. So the fact that she stuck it out, she graduated at age 20. And she stuck it out and graduated, that's remarkable. And that is something that is a testament to the administration for allowing her to stay and to finish there, and to the teachers. Now, I did have to give them a number of tools. I had a teacher last year, a math interventionist, who was panic-stricken because he got a young man in there from Guatemala who did not speak Spanish. He spoke Acatec, which I had never heard of, and he did not know how to count. Not only did he not know how to recite 1, 2, 3, he did not know that the one line stood for one object and that the 2 stood for 2 objects. He had no correspondence at all. So I got panicked emails from this teacher. I went and observed. I wanted to watch the student. And I told the teacher later, I said, you know what? Don't even worry about him passing the test at the end of the year, the EOC, the finals, because he's not going to. And it's not going to count against you, so don't worry about that. When you're dealing with ESL, we don't worry so much about proficiency scores. Growth is where we live. That's where we've got to put all our eggs, that's the basket. But so once I assured him that he wasn't going to be punished for this student's lack of achievement, he was more willing to work with him. And I said, let's find a computer program. Imagine Learning has a wonderful math program. It's not too juvenile, and that's a huge thing with our kids. It can't be too juvenile. And Imagine Learning has this fantastic program called Big Brains. And if you can get your administrator to get you a license, you can share one license with different students. And Imagine Learning, yes, they're expensive, but they will teach you ways to get around that expense. Yvonne Parrish, Parrish, is the rep that handles Tennessee. And she is a fantastic contact person. She's got a lot of resources. But Big Brains helped my student in a number of ways. First of all, it started him off at the very basics of math. The number item correspondence, which he did not have, which I taught my daughters before they were a year old by climbing stairs. 1, 2, that's how we learned it. He didn't have that. He had not been in school. He was not valued for what was here. He was valued for his muscle and what his body can do, and that's what a lot of our kids are experiencing. So that was a good place. So while this teacher was teaching the other students, then my student could work on Big Brains. There are other programs out there. You just have to take a look and see what works for your kiddo. As far as computer programs, there is nothing out there that will teach a child to be fluent. And my gen ed teachers ask me all the time, do you have a computer program or something I can put this kid on? Basically what they're saying is, can you get him out of my hair for a little while so I can really teach? And I tell them, you know what, I love Rosetta Stone. No one ever got fluent in a different language by using Rosetta Stone. But it's a great reinforcement tool if you can get it. Duolingo is another one. That's freebie. And if you can use that for a limited time, because we've got a Castaneda versus Pickard, lawsuit that says we have to really teach them. We can't just stick them in a corner and give them something to occupy them. And some of our teachers don't understand that either, that they are responsible for this child's education. Maybe the scores are not what we are looking at, but for some reason, if this child gets in trouble or has a challenge and there is a conference, the principal will ask, what modifications, what accommodations have you been making for this student's instruction? And now with the new ILP, that is our accountability piece for our gen ed teachers. We'll have to complete that with our gen ed teachers. What have you been doing with this student? So math is a challenge. I try to work math in with my SIFE kids in every lesson I possibly can. Whether it's counting money, I gave the illustration yesterday. I want them to know about George Washington. President's Day, we need to know who Washington and Lincoln were. So with my traditional high school kids, we were working on a book. With my SIFE kids, I had a $1 bill and a $5 bill. Who are these guys? Why are they on here? Let's talk about, well, I pull out the 1 and the 5 and immediately I got their attention. And I had fake $1 bills and $5 bills. In fact, some of my boys were horsing around with them and they got their picture in the last 10 TESOL newsletter. So if you see a bunch of boys acting like they're rich boys with all this fake money, those are my knuckleheads. But they're interested. They want to learn how to manage the money because it's something they take with them right then that has real meaning. Something that they take with them immediately is also learning how to make an appointment for the doctor, learning how to buy a cell phone. I can't tell you how many kids I've taken up to Boost Mobile because they get their first couple of paychecks. The first thing they want to do is get a good phone so they can call home, first of all, and so they can upload pictures to their Facebook and tell lies to everybody back home. This is an aside. One day in front of my refugee center, somebody had driven a bit of a fancy car, not a collector car, but a bit of a fancy car, maybe a Camaro or Mustang or something, a sharp little car. And so my kids start to leave me at the end of our school day, and they see this car, and they're all taking pictures of each other in front of this car. And I see later where they've put it on Facebook and told lies. This is my car. See what I'm doing? Ugh. You can't even speak English and you're already lying with the little bit of English you know. But they are still kids. I mean, you saw my crazies on top of the swing. They're still kids. Even though they come with a lot of baggage, they're still kiddos. Another challenge as far as dealing with their social and emotional learning, dealing with specific content such as math and reading. They don't have computer skills, many of them. And teaching them how to manipulate a mouse was something new for my kids. They could probably swipe, but typing and manipulating a mouse. So sometimes I bring a couple of laptops. I've got some old laptops, and I'll set them up and put them on a little game called Line Writer. Have you ever played Line Writer? Oh, you need to look it up. You make lines with the mouse on the screen, and then you have this little guy on a skateboard, and he rides the lines. That's the whole thing right there. And we don't play it a lot, but that may be the first time for some of my kids how they have learned that the mouse actually controls what happens on the screen. Because otherwise they're touching the screen or they don't know what to do. So something that is applicable immediately is valuable with our kids, with our SIFE kiddos. And then of course, understanding that we're dealing with kids that have PTSD, undiagnosed PTSD, and that affects things such as their memory. I have had students who, when I teach them something, the next day they couldn't remember it. And I might find out that they had a bad phone call from home. And you know, our kids in the States have a lot of traumatic experiences as well. But for the most part, it's a different kind of trauma than what our kids from our war-torn countries, our gang-ridden countries are dealing with. I love this graphic. In teaching, you can't do the Bloom stuff until you take care of the Maslow stuff. And this is something that I share with my gen ed teachers when they have heart attacks, because their 9th grader, who is 16, is not going to be able to read Romeo and Juliet with the rest of the class. No, lower your expectations. If your SIFE 16-year-old 9th grader walks out of there knowing that Romeo was a guy and Juliet was a girl and it was a story written by William Shakespeare and can tell you about that much in English, that's a success. That's a success. Because if we went to their country, chances are we couldn't tell them anything about their great literature. We would be SIFE students over there. We would be illiterate in their country. And when you express it like that to your gen ed teachers, it kind of puts a different spin on it. Because our students are not necessarily lacking. They can do. They just can't do the things that native speakers are accustomed to doing. Any thoughts so far before we go on a little bit?
We had a social worker that would come in and do like a group session with them, and we kept journals and stuff just for some of the things that they've been through. And she was bilingual, so that helped as well.
What a wonderful gift. And that's at your newcomer school. Mm-hmm. That's fantastic.
So we paid through a grant that we'd received, you know.
Okay, wonderful. And if you don't have that, journaling is something that I have found with my kids. I do on a daily basis, even my kids that don't speak any English. If I write something up on the board and they can copy it, then that's modeling for them appropriate punctuation, grammar, syntax. That's kind of how we do with our beginning literacy kids when they're in kindergarten. They copy the A's on the paper. They copy the B's. Why should we expect anything different from our beginning literacy students that are older? We just can't give them baby stuff. So I use a lot of environmental print. I was talking yesterday about an ABC set that I got off Teachers Pay Teachers. And instead of A is apple, B is ball, C is cat, D is dog, it is A is Adidas, B is Barbie, M is McDonald's. So it's environmental print ABCs, and it's available on Teachers Pay Teachers. I think it's free. I love free. That's what my budget can handle. But if you take a look online at Teachers Pay Teachers and Pinterest and see what other people are doing and freely steal their ideas, it's fantastic. And I will take a lot of basic literacy materials that I see on Teachers Pay Teachers and modify it for my SIFE kids. And understand too that our SIFE kids may have different goals. Graduation may not be a goal. It might be our goal. It might be our school district's goal. It might be our principal's goal because it looks good on all of our statistics. And I get that, I understand that, but it may not be our students' goal. So we may need to sit down with our older kids, now certainly not with our 4th graders, but we may need to sit down and say, okay, do you see yourself graduating? Why or why not? What do you see yourself doing and how can I help you get there? If we have an opportunity to partner with our career and technical teachers, those are our key. If you have a CTE teacher in your building that you can make nice with and perhaps get your ESL students in there into the auto mechanics or the cosmetology or whatever they might have, that is a wonderful thing for them to have something to do when they leave school. My father was a SIFE student. He was not a foreigner. He was born in Eagleville, Tennessee. He quit school when he was in 6th grade and lied about his age and joined the 3 Cs. And then at 16, lied about his age again and joined the Navy to go fight the Japanese in World War II. He never returned to school. He regretted that his whole life. But he did okay. He worked for Chrysler for 30 years. He had a good job and a good pension. So after graduation, if they do graduate, just because they don't go to a college doesn't mean that all is lost. Now, on the flip side of that, one of my former ELs just graduated in May from Motlow, and her degree is in robotics. She's not documented. It took her 10 years to graduate because she had almost no help at all. She went to Lipscomb for a year. It was too much. She had to live in the dorms. That was one of their requirements at the time, and it was too much. So she paid class by class, worked and paid, and finally graduated. And now she's working as a robotics engineer. I don't know, she's making more than I'll ever make. But whatever the encouragement would be, whatever our students choose to do, whatever is open for them, let's give them the tools that they need to do that to their very best ability. Whether it's math skills, reading skills, social and emotional skills, because those sorts of things are just as important, if not more sometimes, than the academics. This kind of goes along with what we were saying before. Our school should be a safe environment, our classroom. When I was watching the video with you all just a few minutes ago about Gaspar, and he was walking in that street at night by himself, my mom heart is just going, oh honey, get someone to walk with you. There's no lions, but there's really bad people and they might jump you. And you know, our kids face that. Unfortunately, I think that instances of confrontation are either we're hearing about it more or it's happening more often. I'm not sure. But our classrooms need to be a safe environment, and we need to teach our colleagues how to provide a safe environment, how to concentrate on what these kids can do and change the goals, to change the assessments. They're not going to be able to pass a 50-point short answer essay test on short stories, Edgar Allan Poe short stories, literary criticism. So what do we really want them to take away from? By the way, I'm in my 50s and no one has ever asked me to do a literary analysis of The Telltale Heart. Just saying. So let's take a look at some real life stuff for these kids. And that's what, you already know that, but that's what we need to take back to our teachers. So providing a safe environment, hearing their stories is huge. Giving them an opportunity to tell their stories. Whether it's through a journal, whether it's through letting them talk to you and you scribing down their stories, whether it's in informal conversation. I like to have lunch in the cafeteria with my middle school and high schoolers. And there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, I tend to avoid the teacher's lounge. It's not my favorite. The lunchroom also can be a challenge for our kids. Navigating the lunch line, especially if they've got dietary restrictions such as no pork, and getting our lunch ladies to give some sort of a reasonable alternative can be interesting at times. But also at lunchtime, that's when my kids will open up and they'll say, oh man, I'm so tired. Well, why are you tired? Oh, because, my mom works all night and I had to stay up with the baby. Well, how old is the baby? Well, she's 7 months old. And that's when you find out that your 8th grader is filling the role of a mom, and that's why she's falling asleep in first period every day. So giving them an opportunity to express their stories. Do you all have a chance for your kids to express their stories in your classes? If you can find a way to write them down, if the kids tell you the stories and then create a bit of a classroom book with their permission, they love to read about themselves. They love to write model poems about themselves, like diamantes or bio poems, and then display them. Now, some kids won't want to give a lot of information because they're pretty traumatized. that's okay. I don't force that. I will let them tell me if it's for my eyes only or if it's something I can share. But giving them a chance to talk about their experiences. This young man in the very front, I want to talk a little bit about these two guys. This young man here, that's Samuel. Samuel came to me when he was 17. He came to me from El Salvador. He was in his senior year of high school in El Salvador, and he was hoping to graduate. Well, in his town, there are two gangs that rule the village, rule the town, and they both told him, you have to choose who you're going to be with. It's this gang or this gang. And he said, I don't want to, because I want to go to college. And they said, well, you have to choose or we're going to kill your little brother, who is 6 years old. And he knew that they would because they'd already killed his cousin in a rather brutal manner. So he left and came on a tourist visa. Now, he had more money and resources than most, but he came on a tourist visa to Miami, which is where his sister lived, and just let his tourist visa run out. So he's in the process of trying to get permanent asylee status. He got temporary refugee status. But he now, brilliant. He probably could have passed the high set. He didn't want to take it. I think he was intimidated by the language. But he's working in a construction company. He does their books and keeps all their books for them. He's also an assistant pastor at a Spanish church, a Spanish charismatic church in Smyrna. And he preaches every Sunday. Now he's 21. He preaches every Sunday to the youth group, and he's a wonderful guy. He's a model guy. The kiddo right behind him, this is my little guy. His name is Tutu. He's a Karen refugee from Burma. He came here, I got him again at 17, with very little English skills. He had a few. And he stayed with me for 2 years, and we practiced things like job interview skills, how to shake a hand, how to look someone in the eye. We practiced his driver's test, not the driving part. Don't do that. I don't do that. But we practiced the written test. And he has since stopped coming to see me. He has gotten married. He is 20 now. He's gotten married. He's got one child and another one on the way, and he's got a job at Nissan in Smyrna. He doesn't speak English very well, but in his job, he doesn't need to. So it's not the end of the world. Whatever they choose to do, whatever avenues are open for them, let's shift our focus a little bit and give them the tools that they need to be successful in their particular endeavor. But again, that's all part of hearing their stories. Creating a community, even before the strategies, we have to create a community. We need to create a community. My kiddos, they end up being almost like a youth group. They rely on each other, a support group for each other. No one else really understands the challenges that these kids have faced. Most of them are here without parents. Most of them have been self-supporting for a long time. And our native English speakers may not understand that. Our administrators may not understand that. And that is where we need to educate our administrators. That these kids have a whole different worldview than we do. And graduation does not have the same value to them that it does to us. Not that it's not valuable, it's just a different value. Tutu has already told me that he wants his children to graduate from high school and go to college. And I see that a lot with our kids, with our families. They may not have the first generation may not have the opportunity for education, but they want their children to take advantage of that. So I want to give these parents the opportunity to participate in their children's literacy. So something that I have done frequently, I use picture books with my kids, and I just grabbed 3 as I was leaving. This one is for a little bit advanced. It's Pieces and Offering. I love this. First of all, it's free. It's from Dolly Parton. And secondly, it's in 2 languages. So even if they don't speak or write Spanish very well, the words are there and it looks familiar. And I might read this to them, and we might talk about the key vocabulary, and then have a discussion, because they need those oracy skills. And say, what is peace? What do you think peace is? What brings you peace? How did you have peace in your previous home, or how did you not have peace? So something like this, to use it as a jumping off point. This one caused a little bit of a stir when I used it, because it's a baby book. And my kids were immediately offended, and I'm like, now wait just a minute. I want you to be able to read this like you're reading it to your little cousin. It's always a little cousin. You know, read this like you're reading it to a little cousin. See, one of my moms, not just one, several of my moms have come to me and said they want to learn English so they can help their kids with their homework. And, you know, that's legit. Bring it home. Say, what if you're babysitting and your kid that you're babysitting wants you to read a story? Wouldn't you like to be able to read a story to them? Let's practice this one. I know that it's a baby book. I read baby books all the time because I have a 2-year-old granddaughter. But let's take a look. So, you know, that's something else that we used. And acknowledge to them, yes, this is a baby book. I don't think you're a baby. Almost the same with this one. I like this one. I am a rainbow, because it's talking about the colors, but it also talks about idioms in here, where she talks about being yellow. When I'm feeling scared, kids call me yellow, but I can find my courage and be a brave fellow. Well, okay, when I read this to them, first of all, we talk about yellow, because I start with the basics. They don't know their colors. We talk about yellow and fellow, how they rhyme. What does a fellow mean? And we talk about that. And then the idiom. When I say somebody's yellow, what am I really saying? Oh, I'm saying that they're scared. Ah, I'm saying they're a scaredy cat. And then that's another idiom. What? Yes, because they're going to hear these words and these phrases, and that's going to blow their minds, because they're going to come to you at some point and say, what is a scaredy cat? Well, okay, let me tell you. Or with my students, it was raining cats and dogs. They did not know what raining cats and dogs meant, and so they were so confused. But don't be afraid to use picture books as a tool to give them to share with somebody else. Tell them, I'm teaching you how to teach someone else. And that takes the pressure off them. I'm not teaching you because I think you're not able. I'm not teaching you because I think you're a baby. I'm teaching you because you need to teach someone else. And in the process, they will learn how to spell nose, because my Spanish kids read that and they go, no sé. And they'll learn how to spell ears and eyes, and learn what those parts of the body are. There's another site I want to take you to, and I believe we're running out of time, so I want to go there pretty quickly. Mary Lou McCloskey has a lot of information. Her website is MLMCC, and all of this here. Wonderful handouts, 5-finger book review. I pulled up one to have handy for us. This is her presentation on how to welcome and empower and enrich new students with interrupted formal education, and she talks about making school comprehensible and interactive, a lot of the things that we've talked about, extending instruction, using guided reading. And these handouts can be something that you can use for you, but that you can also share with your colleagues. In this particular handout, she talks about the difference between a hug and a handshake, and why some people don't want you to hug them, and why a handshake is appropriate in the United States, but in Japanese culture it is not. You bow. So her resource is really, really good. Also, Adult Basic Education from Minnesota has a lot of wonderful resources. Their education system has hopped on board and designed a lot of ready-to-print-off materials with dialogues such as how to make a doctor's appointment, how to make change for a 20, and it's all right there for you. So if you look up Minnesota ESL and, mess around with it a little bit, there are some really good things on there. I like to use adult materials. I have never found any materials that work for all my kids. So I create my own because I steal parts of this and I swipe parts of that. So I'm taking early elementary stuff from this teacher and adult ESL stuff from this other teacher and using it for whatever suits my kids. So before we leave, any thoughts, comments, questions, ideas, anything that you want to share?
Sure. I did my dissertation on the success of SIFE students.
Wonderful.
And I interviewed some of my former students and whatever. And I've been doing this for 15 years, and it was still eye-opening for me because their success is totally different from my idyllic success.
What are their ideas?
One of my students graduated in the top 10% of his class. He was vice president of his class, so I felt like he fit in. To me, he was successful. And he told me he was such a failure because now he can't move forward. He can't do anything after graduation. He tried, and they have a little money, so he tried to go to college. His father, came up with the $8,000. He was enrolled, but then he found out that was per semester. And he said he still owed too much money. He's already cost his family too much money. And then I interviewed one of my guys that had dropped out in 10th grade, and to me, that was a failure on my part. But when I interviewed him, he's like, look out there, you see the car I'm driving? He was so proud of himself. And he said it was my responsibility to go ahead and drop out because, I was living with my sister and her family, and it was my responsibility to take care of them. Yes. And he said, American schools gave me that opportunity. He was so proud,
Right.
And so
that's very telling.
It changed my perspective. And I still, my goal is for them to graduate.
Sure.
But as long as they can have a good excuse for why they're dropping out. Now, we had one kid to drop out, and he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't even working. We made him come back,
Oh, very good.
Yes, we did. My principal's very strong-minded about things like that, but I don't know, it's just eye-opening.
Well, that reinforces their goals may not be our goals. Of course we want them to graduate because so many doors are closed to them if they don't have that. And that is what I tell them, please graduate, because if you don't, that's kind of where it's going to stop for you in many areas. But they're not going to, it's not the end of the world if they don't. Their goals may not be our goals. And, sometimes this is going to sound maybe a little bit controversial, but I like my students to be prepared, especially my not documented students, to earn a living without benefit of having a boss over them telling them, this is how much I'm going to pay you. So I want my kiddos to be able to have the knowledge to own their own auto mechanic business or to have their own hairdressing business, that they can be their own boss. That way they're not at the mercy of some unscrupulous boss because they don't have documentation. Now, some of our kids will have documentation that's a little different animal. But yeah, our goals may not be their goals. And that is something that our gen ed teachers need to be reminded of. That's where you are the ambassadors. Their goals may not be our goals. Now with elementary kids, elementary does a better job of bringing kids along because they're more used to it. But it's not, we're still dealing with trauma, we're dealing with socialization challenges that may slow them down. Any other thoughts or ideas?
I use, with my middle schoolers, I use National Geographic for Kids books because, like you said, they'll say, I'm not reading that baby book. Mm-hmm. Right. But National Geographic, they're getting some science or some, kind of mixed in. So yes. I kind of tricked them there, and they bought into it. So
it's wonderful. Dollar Tree, sometimes you can never predict Dollar Tree because you never know what they're going to have. But if you go to the kids section, you can get some of those National Geographic books, leveled readers for $1 each. And sometimes you can get the really simple ones, but they've got the real pictures about chimpanzees or whatever. But I find with my kids, even if they can pick out a word or two, they're reading it. And you know, and even something as simple as the mechanics of a book, our kids may not know that. I had a girl that came to my class last year, did not know how to hold a pencil. She was 17, she did not know how to hold a pencil. That was our first lesson. So, good idea. Any other thoughts?
How to sit in a chair. That was my hardest one because they would just get up and walk around because in their school they could do that. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm standing. Yeah, so just to sit in a chair.
Yep, that's not how we do this here. Yeah, there are some interesting challenges. My girl that was afraid of lions, another thing that she had never done was live in a building. She'd always lived out in the open or lived in a tent. So things like walls and bathroom stalls, she didn't know that you were supposed to close the door on the bathroom stall. And so the other students would be like, she's in there. And I'm like, oh gosh, well just tell her. Just show her how it works. So, yeah.
But sometimes it's a fear too of shutting that door. I mean, because I'm in a portable and have a little bathroom and they don't want to shut the door. Oh. It's a fear because of some of the experience that came across.
Okay, well, we'll stop here. This PowerPoint will be up at the link that they'll send you. And I have certainly enjoyed being with you all today.